Okay, guys, we are going to be on chapter 8 of Whatever Happened to Penny Candy. And this chapter is called Fast Money. Dear Chris, one aspect of inflation which is poorly understood by almost everyone, including some economists, is velocity. In the mid-1980s, officials became very concerned about it. Economists in the Federal Reserve discuss it frequently. Some are also discussing a related topic called the demand for money. First, I'll say a few words about velocity, then the demand for money. Like everything else about economics, velocity is easy to understand if you ignore all the complex theory. Simply think about people. Just keep thinking about the way individual human beings behave. Many years ago, when I was still a student, I asked an economist to tell me about velocity. He said velocity is the component of the equation of exchange, which is computed by dividing PQ by M. I'm going to try to make it a little more clear than that. The economist meant to say that velocity is the speed at which money changes hands. For instance, if a dollar bill is traded once in a year, its velocity is 1. If the dollar bill changes hands 5 times in a year, then its velocity is 5. Imagine people sitting in a circle. Each has 2 things in his hands, a dollar bill and a baseball card. Now imagine each person selling his card to the other person on his right for $1. Every card has been sold and every dollar has changed hands once. The velocity of the money is 1. Now imagine the same circle of 10 people. Each has a baseball card, but only one person has a dollar. Now imagine the person with a dollar buying his neighbor's card. The neighbor then uses the dollar to buy his neighbor's card. That neighbor uses the dollar to buy his neighbor's card again, and so forth. The dollar goes all the way around the circle, and each person uses it to buy a card. That single dollar has done the same work as the $10 in the first example. All the cards were sold for $1, but the money changed hands not once, but 10 times. Velocity was 10. In other words, a small amount of money can do the same work as a large amount. It can be used in the same number of transactions and have the same effect on prices if it changes hands quickly enough. Why would people trade their money away faster? What would make you trade your money away faster? A decline in the demand for money. When I said in an earlier letter that money responds to the law of supply and demand, I meant exactly that. There is a demand for money as well as a supply for it. After all, you want more money, right? Most people do. When demand for the dollar falls, this means people are more willing to spend dollars than to hold them. They buy more goods and services than keep fewer dollars. This has the same effect on prices as an increase in the money supply. People are spending faster, so each dollar is used in more transactions and has more effect on prices. If demand for the dollar rises, people are more willing to hold dollars and less willing to spend them. Their buying decreases, and this has the same effect as a decrease in the money supply. The dollars exist, but they aren't being used as much, and they aren't affecting prices as much. A very important point here is that the demand for money is the cause, and velocity is the effect. If the demand for money falls, the money changes hands faster. The velocity of circulation rises. If the demand for money rises, velocity falls. Some people speak as if velocity were a force in itself, but it is not. It is a symptom. When we want to know if the demand for the dollar is rising or falling, we can look at how fast the dollar is changing hands. Inflation usually goes in 3 stages. Each stage is caused by a change in the demand for money. Here are 3 examples. Number 1, suppose you earn $20,000 and you want to buy new shoes. Last year, the shoes cost $50, but the government has been printing money, so the shoes have risen to $60. You decide to hang on to your money, hoping the shoes will come back down to $50. In this first example, you did not spend your money. You held on to your dollars so that they did not circulate. Your demand for dollars was high, and the velocity of your dollars was low. In the first stage of inflation, people save their money, waiting for prices to fall. Because they hold on to their money, it doesn't enter the market to bid up prices. Little of the newly printed money is being spent, and prices cannot rise very fast. Number 2, suppose you still have your $20 and officials are still printing money. The price of the shoes is up to $70 and you decide to buy now before the price goes higher. Your brother, who intended to buy shoes next year, also decides to buy now before the price goes higher. Notice your brother has speeded up his buying. He is getting rid of his money faster than he intended to. The money is circulating faster. Demand for dollars has fallen and velocity has increased. In the second stage of inflation, the money changes hands faster. A little bit of money is beginning to do the work of a lot of money. Prices start rising faster than the money is being printed. Suppose you can earn another $20. This is example 3, sorry. Suppose you can earn another $20. The price of the shoes has risen to $80. You do not want another pair of shoes, but your money is losing its value. You know shoes are not losing their value. You trade your money for another pair of shoes because you trust the value of the shoes more than you trust the value of the dollars. Your friends and neighbors are doing the same thing. They're buying anything they can find just so they can get rid of their money before it becomes worthless. In the third stage of inflation, the money changes hands very fast. People don't want it, and they're trying to get rid of it. The demand for money is falling like a stone, and velocity is skyrocketing. In the third stage, no one can stop the money from losing its value. Even if the printing presses are stopped, the money becomes worthless because no one wants it. The third stage is the final runaway stage of inflation. It is ended when people completely reject the money and begin using something new for money. They usually switch over to a better foreign currency or to gold or silver. During American runaway inflations, they generally switch over to gold or silver. If you ever spend time in Latin American country, you might get a chance to see inflation go through all three stages. It's very common in places like Brazil, Argentina, and Peru. For instance, it happened in Chile during the mid-1970s. In some parts of the world, the inflation is usually stopped during the second stage. A depression or recession follows immediately. But in the Latin American countries, the inflations often go all the way before the corrections are allowed to begin. Now that you know about velocity, you may be a little worried about it. You may be wondering what keeps velocity from suddenly going wild and destroying the money. What keeps velocity under control? The answer is that the people, you and I, and everyone else keep velocity under control. In fact, there is probably no other part of the economy that is as democratically controlled as velocity. Every person makes daily decisions about spending his money. Therefore, although he may not realize it, every person makes daily decisions about velocity. If a person spends his money more quickly than usual, velocity increases. If he spends his money more slowly than usual, velocity falls. Actually, though, people do not change their spending habits very much unless they have a good reason, so velocity seldom varies except gradually over years or decades. However, two things can cause people to change their spending habits enough to change velocity quickly. Either one, someone tampers with the supply of money, or two, the government, which prints the money and enforces the legal tender laws, begins to go out of business. A good example of number one happened in the U.S. between 1915 and 1929. During World War I and in the 1920s, the government caused a big increase in the supply of money. Those newly created dollars were the main thing that caused the roaring 20s to roar. The inflation caused stock prices to skyrocket, so millions of people felt rich temporarily. Few people realized that the inflation that had made them feel so prosperous was setting the stage for the Great Depression. The inflation caused people to spend their money faster, so during the 1920s, velocity rose. Then during the early 1930s, the Depression era, the government stopped expanding the money supply and prices fell. People were fearful about losing their jobs, so they avoided spending money, and velocity fell too. A good example of number two happened in Vietnam during the 1970s. When the North Vietnamese army invaded South Vietnam, everyone knew that the South Vietnamese government would soon be out of business. The South Vietnamese people realized that no one would be enforcing the legal tender laws. The South Vietnamese money was called the piastre. Demand for it plunged. The Vietnamese began spending their piastres as quickly as possible, and the velocity of the money rose violently. Prices went wild, and people tried to trade their piastres for anything. They preferred gold, and some of them fled into the U.S. carrying lots of the yellow metal, but they would take almost anything they could get. It was not unusual for the American airmen who were flying into Vietnam to be offered large bundles of piastres in exchange for a few U.S. dollars. A final point, the fact that inflations go through three stages does not mean they go through these three stages in an inevitable mechanical way. They can go from stage one to stage two, then back to stage one again if the government is willing to trigger a recession. For instance, in the late 1970s, the U.S. was in stage two and moving towards stage three. The government tightened the money supply, thereby giving us the back-to-back 1980 and 1982 recessions. The 82 recession was the worst since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The demand for money stabilized and velocity stopped climbing. In fact, statistics showed velocity began falling. Apparently, we went back into stage one. The 1980s were the first time since World War II that velocity had fallen. Government economists became quite concerned about it. Many shifted their attention away from the supply of money to the demand for money. Chris, I'll discuss velocity and the demand for money in greater depth in a future set of letters. For now, remember, inflation goes through three stages, and three stages are caused by changes in the demand for money. Velocity is a way to know how the demand for money is changing. From Uncle Eric. And I should have done this already. I wanted to see, and unfortunately I have my papers out here. Oh, I can pause it. Hang on. Okay, so I just wanted to quickly go over a few phrases. Velocity is the speed at which money changes hands. People trade money faster if a decline in the demand for money occurs. So people are willing to spend, not save. This is as if the money supply increases. And then it asks you to list the three stages of inflation. And they would be: first, people hold their money and prices do not rise. Second, people spend their money and prices rise more quickly than money is printed. And third, money changes hands very quickly and runaway inflation occurs. And that is the end of chapter 8.